you feeling when you hear about this?
It's the whole thing is unspeakable, Jake. It's just grotesque and gut-wrenching. But look, this is a sad reality of being a Jewish person in the United States or around the world today. You mentioned that the victim, Ms. Milgram, grew up sort of seeing this type of anti-Semitic sentiment. Well, studies have shown that young people, about 50% of all young people, see Nazi symbols or anti-Semitic rhetoric on their social media feeds every day. And if we look at the broader trends, going beyond even the hate speech that young people and all people are subjected to every day, Andy referred to this. If you look at the trends, anti-Semitic actions, it is just a straight line up. The Anti-Defamation League has studied anti-Semitic hate crime incidents. Those numbers have gone up every year. This past year, 2024, was actually the highest year on record of anti-Semitic conduct in the 46 years that the ADL has been gathering this data. And Jake, I'm sure you know, Andy, you probably know as well. It's just something that Jewish people live with now. I said before, I'm on the board of directors of a nonprofit Jewish camp. And 2 or 3 years ago, we made the very difficult decision that we needed an armed guard standing there by the entrance of a summer camp. And I think most Jewish camps do that now. You can't go to a bar mitzvah, an event at a synagogue, without seeing some type of armed guard. It's a sad reality, but it's the reality that we live in.
And just to remind people at home, this American Jewish Committee event at this Jewish museum, which was not advertised because of these security concerns, this was an event that was trying to make a humanitarian effort to help the citizens of Gaza. I mean, that was the reason for the event. Ellie Honig, Andrew McCabe, Evan Pettis, thanks so much. CNN's Whitney Wild is in Chicago. That's where police say the suspect is from. Whitney, tell us what's going on there.
Well, I think you hear some noise. There's an ambulance about a block away from me that is not related to what we're seeing here. Throughout the day, though, Jake, it has certainly been a very busy scene as law enforcement is pouring through this address associated with Elias Rodriguez. It was shortly after 7:30 this morning that our team saw FBI agents in tactical gear with a dog enter that residence. This is a dense neighborhood. This is Albany Park, Chicago. This is on the north side. Again, this is a dense residential neighborhood. They were in and out of a pretty dense apartment building here. This is a very ethnically diverse neighborhood, Jake, just to give you some local context. We spoke with one neighbor who was utterly shocked to learn that the person suspected in this horrific crime in Washington was his neighbor. He said that he saw him. He hadn't spoken with him in a couple of weeks, but he couldn't believe it, Jake, because, you know, for the most part, he knew him as a pretty quiet person, a pretty normal person. He had a Hello Kitty on his door. So all of these details of what this neighbor knew about Elias Rodriguez is hard to comprehend in this moment. Jake, again, law enforcement pouring through whatever details they can find here at this address associated with Elias Rodriguez. Other threads that law enforcement, as you heard during this press conference, are trying to follow is this question about this manifesto, this letter that went up online on an X account that was, you know, law enforcement is investigating whether or not that's associated with Elias Rodriguez. Some of those writings are certainly quite concerning in the context of this, what we've seen in the last 24 hours, Jake, but many more questions to answer. Law enforcement hoping to find some of those answers right here on the north side of Chicago. Jake.
Whitney Wild, thank you so much. The couple who was killed was attending an event hosted by the American Jewish Committee, and joining me now is the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, Ted Deutsch. He's also a former Democratic congressman from Florida. Congressman, first of all, our deepest condolences on this horrible, horrible day. You knew the victims. They were gunned down after attending your organization's event, which was focused, again, this was an event focused on bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza. Tell us more about Sarah and Yaron.
Jake, thanks. First of all, it's such a tragic loss of two beautiful souls. Sarah, we've all come to learn, America has come to learn a lot about Sarah and Yaron, but for us, they were partners of AJC. We worked closely with them. Sarah was deeply involved in the work that AJC does that was on full display last night, that was focused, as you point out, on humanitarian diplomacy, on trying to bring people together. She participated in programs with us trying to bring together people from across the region in the Middle East. That's what's so horrific about this. I was just listening to your last conversation, and and the best thing we can do to help honor the memory of Yaron and Sarah is to not accept that this is just the reality. That to be a Jew in America or in the world just means that you have to fear being out in public with another group of Jews. That's the moment that we've now come to. What happened last night compels us to reject that reality and to stand together, Jews and non-Jews alike, to make sure that we don't ever have to see this kind of tragedy again.
The location of this event was not listed online, I assume for security reasons. According to your group's website, the location was only provided to those who registered. So was this an intentional security-related move, do you think? How do you think the suspect was able to bypass this?
We are awaiting the results of the investigation. We don't know the answer to that. We obviously take security very seriously. We had security inside, and security guards who apprehended him when he came inside. Tragically, what happened that this awful these murders took place outside, and the response from the administration, from the Trump administration, and from Mayor Bowser's administration, police department, the attorney general, everyone had jumped right into this. And for all of that, we're grateful. Now the question is making sure that we understand exactly what happened here, so that the prosecution can go forward, and so that all of us in the community can understand how something like this could ever happen.
This doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? The guy just didn't wake up out of nowhere and decide to do this, the suspect. This is interesting to me. The Anti-Defamation League's Jonathan Greenblatt told me earlier today that anti-Semitism on Twitter, or X, is, quote, terrible and, quote, unambiguously awful. Last night, the CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino, I think is her name, she posted, quote, anti-Semitism and violence have no place in America. The murder of 2 Israeli embassy employees last night is a tragedy we can't ignore, and praying for the family, friends, and colleagues. But she says there's no place for anti-Semitism in America. She works for a website that provides a huge place for anti-Semitism, and she says it can't be ignored. I mean, don't the leaders of Twitter or X pretty much ignore the anti-Semitism going on that site?
Every social media company, Jake, every single one has a series of standards that are meant to prevent anti-Semitism and other forms of hate on their sites. These are their own rules, and time again, they fail to enforce their own rules. What happens on so many social media outlets is horrific. It's true, and it's part of the problem. But you have to zoom out to actually think about what's really happening here. Jake, when you normalize the idea that someone can march down the streets in America or show up on a college campus in America and dress like a terrorist, wearing the headband of a terrorist group, celebrate the massacre of Jews, the worst attack on the Jewish community on October 7th since the Holocaust. When you see people chanting slogans like globalize the Intifada, this is not just rhetoric. This is incitement. It was only a matter of time that kind of rhetoric led to this kind of violence. No one wants to be right about that, but everyone's been saying it. It's time that the community as a whole, that America as a whole, reject this anti-Semitism. What does that mean? It means that when they see this kind of anti-Semitism on social media, they raise it, they report it. It means that when they see Jewish students that are not allowed to cross the main quad on campus because they're Jews, that they talk to the university and they don't tolerate it. It means that when they see anti-Semitism in businesses, that they talk to the owner and they call them out on it. This is what would happen with any other kind of hatred. We would never just sit back and shake our heads or look the other way. We can't afford to do it here. Our allies and friends across America and across the world, this is a moment when we need them to stand up together. And if they don't know how to do it, then come to us, come to AJC, come to the Jewish community for the kind of guidance that they need. But my God, after what happened last night, We have to just stop talking about whether anti-Semitism comes more from the right or more from the left, and where do we see it? We know it's everywhere, and we know that only by everyone working together will we be able to fight it.
The whole thing about when Democrats will only condemn anti-Semitism when it's on the right, or Republicans will only condemn anti-Semitism when it's on the left, it's so cynical, and it's the coin of the realm here in Washington, D.C.
And you know what, Jake? We've talked about this. The anti-Semites, the ones who commit these horrific acts, they don't check anyone's political affiliation. Anti-Semitism doesn't decide that you're a particular kind of Jew. It's a millennia-old hatred. Yeah. It's a hatred that people need to understand to fight it. We have to do it together. You have to be able to call it out, even when it's coming, especially when it's coming from people that you know and that you work with. That's how we can do this together. We have to do this.
I think together. I can count on one hand the number of members of Congress that are willing to call out anti-Semitism on their own side. Ted Deutsch, thank you so much. It's
coming out of Washington, D.C., where a suspect is in custody in a fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington. The Israeli ambassador to the U.S. says that the victims were a young couple about to be engaged, and Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs identified them as Yoron Lishinsky and Sarah Milgram.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
An eyewitness telling CNN that the suspect pretended to be a witness to the shooting and waited for police to arrive before claiming that he did it for Gaza. To hear that chant coming from the suspect, you can hear it yourself in the video. Police identifying him as a 30-year-old from Chicago named Elias Rodriguez in custody. Here's what the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi told reporters at a news conference overnight.
That as they were taking the trucks of supplies into Gaza, it was then being turned over to Hamas, willingly or unwillingly, but that's where it was going. So Hamas was benefiting from the humanitarian aid. I mean, just imagine this. People in the United States raise money for NGOs to buy humanitarian funding, which goes then to Hamas to use against Israeli soldiers. This is insane. So there's now a foundation that's been created, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is intent on distributing food in Gaza. It's up and running, please God, on the 24th, 25th, where the food will be distributed directly to families, not to organizations, not to humanitarian funding, which goes then to Hamas to use against Israeli soldiers. This is insane. So there's now a foundation that's been created, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is intent on distributing food in Gaza. It's up and running, please God, on the 24th, 25th. Where the food will be distributed directly to families, not to organizations, not to Hamas, so that Hamas doesn't get the food and the people of Gaza get the food. We've been at the forefront of arranging that together with our American counterparts. We could use a word of thanks for that.
Mr. Ambassador, what needs to be done in the immediate future to stop something like this happening again?
What needs to be stopped is this constant pandering to the Palestinian narrative, which ultimately demands the destruction of Israel. Look, Sinwar jumped the gun. This was part of a master plan of the Iranians called the Ring of Fire. And he was supposed to be part of a massive attack that happened all at once, Hezbollah in the north, Hezbollah from Syria and Iraq, the Houthis in the south, and Hamas from Gaza, with the Iranians raining the ballistic missiles they later shot on top of us. Sinwar jumped the gun. He massacred 1,200 of our people. Since then, we've lost another 900 soldiers. We defeat Hamas. We insist that Iran never achieve the possibility for nuclear weapons, and this is going to end. It means the defeat of evil. It means not walking up to evil and enchanting ourselves with evil and romancing evil. Enough is enough. This is an Iranian plot to destroy Israel. It's existed ever since our inception. It's changed because the majority of the Arab world and the majority of the Muslim world wants to live in peace with Israel. And that's why we moved in the direction of the Abraham Accords. And the reason why Iran is so content of doing this is because they see the momentum within the Arab world towards accommodation with Israel. And this was the intention to stop it.
Thank you, call for a ceasefire. I know you already gave us this answer, but I didn't have in record. What is needed to get a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel?
Let our hostages go, disarm, and leave Gaza.
With this, we finish. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, what would victory look like? You mentioned,
I just said what victory looks like. Victory looks like our hostages are released, Hamas is removed from Gaza, and we start a process of rebuilding Gaza for people who really want to live there in peace. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, are you confident law enforcement contact your diplomats and Israeli citizens? Are you confident in U.S. law enforcement?
I'm very confident. I'm very confident. Whoa, why are you pushing me?
Coming out of Washington, D.C., where a suspect is in custody in a fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington. The Israeli ambassador to the U.S. says that the victims were a young couple about to be engaged, and Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs identified them as Yoram Lishinsky and Sarah Milgram.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
An eyewitness telling CNN that the suspect pretended to be a witness to the shooting and waited for police to arrive before claiming that he did it for Gaza. To hear that chant coming from the suspect, you can hear it yourself in the video. Police identifying him as a 30-year-old from Chicago named Elias Rodriguez in custody. Here's what the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi told reporters at a news conference overnight.
We'll be doing everything in our power to keep all citizens safe, especially tonight, our Jewish community. We will follow the facts, we will follow the law, and this defendant, if charged, will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
President Trump posting his condolences to the victims' families on social media. He wrote that the killings are, quote, obviously based on anti-Semitism, which must end now. Again, the words from the commander-in-chief there. A witness to the shooting described those scary moments to CNN earlier. Paige Siegel had been attending the event at the Capitol Jewish Museum that night and wound up asking the suspected gunman if he was okay. Of course, this was before learning exactly who he was.
What's really interesting is that the event was a panel about Israeli organizations, multi-faith organizations, and Palestinian organizations working together to get people in Gaza the aid they need and not fall into the hands of Hamas. The event was ending, and I hear a batch of gunshots and then a pause, and then another batch of gunshots. And I walk to the front door to notify that the security should lock all the doors because the gunshots were so close. And as I'm doing that, a man runs into the front door, acting as if, he's like escaping the gunshots from the street himself. And he runs in and he seems so flustered and so out of whack. So I go up to him and I say, "Are you okay?" And he's muttering, "Call the police, call the police." And he goes, "Yes, I'm okay." I said, "Were you shot?" And he goes, "No, I was not shot. Call the police, call the police." And, where the museum is, the FBI is right next door. The police are close by. So the police sirens have already started. And he's sitting on a bench amongst us for 15 minutes until he comes up to me again with 2 of my other friends. And one of them is helped organize the event. And she offers him a glass of water just because he seems so off. And he takes it, he drinks it. And I say to him, I'm surprised they let you in because, you just ran through the door and this is an event, they had our names, we had to register, they do a security check, we get wanded at the front. You just ran right in. I say, "Do you know where you are?" He doesn't say anything. And I say, "You're at a Jewish museum." And immediately he takes a few steps back and he starts yelling, I did it, talking about shooting and killing the innocent people outside who had just attended the event, who had just left. And he's screaming, I did it for Gaza, I did it for Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. And I'm yelling in the background, get him out, because he's opening up a backpack. And in that moment, a second feels like an hour. I feel like we're all about to die. And he takes out a red and white Jordanian keffiyeh and just continues chanting. And I think people don't realize that senselessly killing people who have just attended an event, the Jewish Museum, is what Hamas supporters mean when they yell, globalize the Intifada.
And I did hear a similar account from another witness in the last hour describing this as an off-record event. So a lot of questions there. CNN's Paula Hancock's joining us with more. Paula, again, witnesses describing this as an off-record event. So a lot of questions about how this suspect may have known to target this particular place. Let's talk more about the international community and what people are saying right now, specifically Israel. What have we heard from government officials overnight?
Well, Polo, we're hearing unity across the board in Israel. All officials who are speaking publicly condemning what has happened, all of them saying that this is an act of anti-Semitism. And we are hearing similar from leaders and foreign ministers around Europe as well. But to focus on Israel to start with, we have just heard a press briefing from Gideon Saar, the foreign minister of Israel, where he said that he had been concerned that something like this was going to happen. Let's listen to what he said.
This is the direct result of toxic anti-Semitic incitement against Israel and Jews around the world that has been going on since the October 7th massacre. Recently, we have witnessed an unprecedented wave of terror attacks and attempts against Israeli missions around the world, with an emphasis on Europe.
Now, he also said that not a week has gone by where there hasn't been an attack or an attempted attack on Israeli targets. He said many of them go unreported. We've also heard from the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who has said this, and I quote, "My heart aches for the families of the beloved young man and woman whose lives were suddenly cut short by a vile anti-Semitic murderer. We are witnessing the terrible cost of anti-Semitism and the wild incitement against the state of Israel." Now, he said that he had been speaking to the US attorney, Pam Bondi, and she had been telling him exactly what had happened, updating him on the investigation, and said that the US President Donald Trump himself was personally involved in managing the response to the attack. Now, the Prime Minister also said that there was a directive that went out around the world that security be reinforced at all Israeli missions, wherever they may be. Now, we heard very similar sentiments from the Israeli president as well, Isaac Herzog, saying, "I'm devastated by the scenes in Washington, D.C." Now, he called it a despicable act of hatred, of anti-Semitism, which has claimed the lives of 2 young employees of the Israeli embassy. At the end of his tweets, he mentioned Israel and America will stand united in defense of our people and our shared values. Terror and hate will not break us. Now, we heard a similar sentiment from the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, who spoke to CNN earlier, and he said that this isn't just an attack on the state of Israel. It's not just an attack on the Jewish community. It is also attack against the US itself. He also said that all embassies of Israel at the moment are currently on high alert. And he called on world leaders to temper their speech. And he also called on world leaders to do more to try and stop anti-Semitic crimes.
Damage, that would be wonderful. Do you know of any wars where there's no collateral damage? The French conducted wars without collateral damage. Our numbers, as a matter of fact, are much better. Okay, we do everything we can. By the way, my son would be alive today if we did what the government of France and most of the European countries are condemning us of doing. We don't strap bomb population centers. We do everything we can to avoid collateral damage. So if you want to criticize, first sit down and talk and present an alternative. What you'd like us to do, perhaps, Mr. Macron, is to roll over and play dead. We don't do that. You want us to turn around and leave and let Hamas stay at our border? Would Emmanuel Macron allow for Hamas to be on the border of Paris? We're a tiny, small country. We can't afford to have jihadis who want to eliminate us on our border. That's simple.
Mr. Ambassador, these people were here last night for an event about
We should get over to the other thing.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The couple were here last night for an event about humanitarian aid in Gaza. Is that not a sign that it's time to resume talking about a ceasefire?
We're constantly in talks about a ceasefire. We'll work it in tomorrow. If Hamas disarms, turns back over the hostages, it's not dependent on us. Hamas is holding on to hostages. They're taking human beings, holding them in dungeons underground, right? And preventing their own people from living in a normal society. So constantly, this constant barrage, this obsessive barrage of contradiction, of criticism of Israel. Like, don't you get tired of it? Isn't it embarrassing? We want a ceasefire. We want the war to end. And we want humanitarian funding to go in. We've been sending humanitarian funding in for a year and a half, despite the fact that it's being used by Hamas to attack our soldiers. I'd like to see another country in the world do that. Provide the enemy with the wherewithal to attack its own soldiers. So now what we've done is created an agency which will distribute the food in Gaza, distribute the medical needs in Gaza without the UN. The UN is the problem, not the solution, because the UN knows very well that as they were taking the trucks of supplies into Gaza, it was then being turned over to Hamas, willingly or unwillingly, but that's where it was going. So Hamas was benefiting from humanitarian aid. I mean, just imagine this. People in the United States raise money for NGOs to buy humanitarian funding, which goes then to Hamas to use against Israeli soldiers. This is insane. So there's now a foundation that's been created, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is intent on distributing food in Gaza. It's up and running, please God, on the 24th, 25th, where the food will be distributed directly to families, not to organizations, not to Hamas, so that Hamas doesn't get the food and the people of Gaza get the food. We've been at the forefront of arranging that together with our American counterparts. We could use a word of thanks for that.
Mr. Ambassador, what needs to be done in the immediate future to stop something like this happening again?
What needs to be stopped is this constant pandering to the Palestinian narrative, which ultimately demands the destruction of Israel. Look, Sinwar jumped the gun. This was part of a master plan of the Iranians called the Ring of Fire. And he was supposed to be part of a massive attack that happened all at once, Hezbollah in the north, Hezbollah from Syria and Iraq, the Houthis in the south, and Hamas from Gaza, with the Iranians raining the ballistic missiles they later shot on top of us. Sinwar jumped the gun. He massacred 1,200 of our people. Since then, we've lost another 900 soldiers. We defeat Hamas. We insist that Iran never achieve the possibility for nuclear weapons, and this is going to end. It means the defeat of evil. It means not walking up to evil and enchanting ourselves with evil and romancing evil. Enough is enough. This is an Iranian plot to destroy Israel. It's existed ever since our inception. It's changed because the majority of the Arab world and the majority of the Muslim world wants to live in peace with Israel. And that's why we moved in the direction of the Abraham Accords. And the reason why Iran is so content with doing this is because they see the momentum within the Arab world towards accommodation with Israel. And this was the intention to stop it.
Thank you, call for a ceasefire. I know you already gave us this answer, but I didn't have in record. What is needed to get a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel?
Let our hostages go, disarm, and leave Gaza.
With this, we finish. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, what would victory look like? You mentioned,
I just said what victory looks like.
Yeah.
Victory looks like our hostages are released, Hamas is removed from Gaza.
Coming out of Washington, D.C., where he's
to the subject we began with, the killing of those two Israeli embassy staffers. Chicago law enforcement authorities were searching the suspect's apartment. Whitney Wild is in Chicago and joins me now live. What are we learning, Whitney, about the suspect and what, if anything, they discovered inside his home?
We don't yet know what they might have taken out of this address that's associated with Elias Rodriguez. We're hoping to hear more from law enforcement today following his first appearance in court. But what I can tell you, Jim, is that we are trying to really put together this pattern of life. And, certainly law enforcement is doing that. We are doing that at CNN. What we are doing now is combing through social media that is linked to Elias Rodriguez. And what we have found is that there was this X account that appears to be linked to Elias Rodriguez. Law enforcement is investigating whether it was written by Elias Rodriguez, and it was posted shortly after the shooting. And it's important, Jim, because it seems to justify some of these actions. For example, the letter that was posted referenced armed action as a valid form of protest called is
the Metropolitan Police Department, Pamela A. Smith. Metropolitan Police Department is the local DC police. We are here to echo what the U.S. Attorney has said, that this crime will not be tolerated in our city. We're grateful for the partnership with our federal partners. MPD and the FBI have worked hand in hand on this investigation and will continue to do so. I also want to acknowledge our families in Washington, D.C., who are suffering and who are afraid and fearful for what this act has done to their sense of safety. But we know that feeling is represented around the globe. Earlier today, I convened a meeting with the Mayor's Interfaith Council, where we spoke with leaders of congregations and Jewish institutions across D.C., as well as D.C. council members and the Attorney General for Washington, D.C. We heard our leaders reiterate messages of love and solidarity with the Jewish community. Sadly, we have had practice standing together as a community to fight anti-Semitism, both in hate speech and in hateful acts. And so in this moment, we stand shoulder to shoulder as one community, united in love, but also committed to justice for this young couple. I also had the opportunity to speak with the Smalls family, and Sonny Smalls is well known in Washington, D.C., and his family has poured decades of time and love into making sure we have the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. And one special aspect of that museum is that it celebrates local Jewish life. It focuses on DC Jews and how they have been a part of our culture and building the city that we love. So once again, our city stands with our community, working with our institutions to make sure we have all the resources that we need to support them. And with that, Judge, I'll turn it over to Chief Smith. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chief Pamela A. Smith, the Chief of Police of the Metropolitan Police Department. Let me begin by reiterating my condolences to the family and friends of Yaron Lazinski and Sarah Milgram. I also want to thank Mayor Bowser, Judge Pirro, and Director Jensen for their collaborative effort and support around this tragic incident. What I also will say is that everyone at the Metropolitan Police Department is holding the family in their thoughts and in their prayers. Our detectives have been working around the clock in close partnership with our federal partners, and this effort regarding this investigation has been a collaborative effort. All of the agencies involved in this investigation have been coordinating seamlessly overnight. Members of the Metropolitan Police Department's Office of Homeland Security Intelligence are working in partnership with the FBI to analyze the suspect's activity prior to the shooting. Around DC, and I want to speak specifically to the community here in the District of Columbia, around DC, you will see an increased presence of law enforcement officers around the community. You will find us around our faith-based organizations. You will see an increased presence around our schools and places like the DC Jewish Community Center. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our Jewish community. I also met, along with Mayor Bowser, with some of our faith leaders I was moved by their desire to ensure that we keep our city safe and we keep our Jewish community members safe. And we are ready to support them in any way possible as we move forward. Most folks in this city know that I take the relationships that we have with our religious communities very seriously. I want to again express and remind the community that if you see something, say something, please let us know. Any information that you provide for us, we will utilize it in support of conducting this investigation. I will now turn it over to the Assistant Director in charge of the Washington Field Office, Steve Jensen.
Thank you, Chief. As the Chief said, I'm Steve Jensen. I'm the Assistant Director in charge of the Washington Field Office for the FBI. And I'd like to start by reiterating what Director Patel pushed out publicly, that the tragic murder of these two Israeli embassy employees outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum last night was both an act of terror and directed violence against the Jewish community. And it has the full and unwavering attention of the FBI. The FBI Washington Field Office, JTTF, has been in lockstep with MPD and with the assistance of FBI offices across the country. We're continuing to investigate and contact the subject's associates, his family members, and coworkers. We are also executing search warrants for his electronic devices, reviewing his social media accounts, and all of his internet postings. Regarding some internet postings, we are aware of some writings that are purported to have been authored by this subject. We're actively investigating to determine both the authorship and the attribution of these writings, if they belong to this subject or not. I'd like to thank our partners in the U.S. Attorney's Office for bringing these significant federal charges in quick order within 24 hours or less than of the time of this incident. Make no mistake, this attack was targeted anti-Semitic violence, and it won't be tolerated. These significant charges are a step towards restoring justice for the victims and their families, but our work is not done. The FBI will continue to pursue all leads and use all available resources to investigate this attack. We join MPD in affirming that there is no ongoing threat to this community. And we're also seeking assistance from the public. We do have gaps in this investigation currently. We know the subject landed in the DC area on May 20th, and that he was taken into custody on May 21st. We're asking the public, anybody who had contact with the subject, anybody who knew his whereabouts or where he was located during that gap of time, to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or to submit an online tip at tips.fbi.gov. And with that, I will turn it back over to Judge.
Thank you very
Thank you, ma'am.
much. All right, we'll take a couple questions. Go ahead.
Yes, so we had spoken to a witness who said that this was a private event, that it wasn't publicized. So is there any idea how he actually knew about this and showed up at this specific event?
You know, that's something that we're investigating right now. I think that, Chief, you'd agree with me on that. That's the kind of thing. Do we know? And
that's still under investigation.
Yeah, we're looking at that. There's a lot. Everybody understand. This is fluid. It's happening now. Go ahead.
Madam U.S. Attorney, you mentioned terrorism. Can you speak to any possible nexus to terrorism? And Assistant Director Jensen, are you confident that this gunman acted alone? Is there any indication at this point that he was inspired? And then also curious if the chief has any concerns about copycat attacks.
Well, first of all, let me say that we're going to continue, as I said, to investigate this as an act of terrorism and as a hate crime. And as we do so, we will bring additional charges whenever those charges are warranted and provable. And I suspect as we go forward, before we get to the grand jury itself, that there will be more charges added. Yes, sir.
Has there been any indication from the investigation so far that the subject was on the radar for the FBI or some other investigative agency around the country? Was he involved in any activism that might have put him on the radar? And also, if you'd also, on the issue of whether there were anybody else connected to him, obviously those writings were posted, and the timing of that, we're wondering whether you've indicated you've seen any indication that someone connected to him might have been associated with posting those?
So a lot of questions.
Okay.
Let me try and break it down. Chief, I think you addressed some of this yesterday when we first initially briefed the public on this matter. There was nothing in criminal records or in our holdings that indicated that this person was previously known to us or would have popped on our radar or MPD's radar. We know that he originated outside of the district, came in for a conference on May 20th, and was a resident in the Chicagoland area. That's what we know about him currently. As far as associates, relatives, the reason we're checking associates and relatives is to put all the pieces together. There's a lot of unknowns. So known contacts, known relatives, known associates, these are basic investigative steps to put a picture, composite picture together of who the subject is, what did people know about him, and who was he closest to. From that, we'll build out the investigation. Aside from that, I couldn't answer more.
Go ahead. Hi.
A quick question. I'm sorry, Keith Alexander, Washington Post. Were you seeking the death penalty? Can you talk a little bit about that? And also, the night of May 20th, any idea where he stayed at all?
I think that we have an idea of that, but let me just say that you know, the president and the attorney general have both indicated that you know, in cases where the death penalty is warranted and seems appropriate, we will use it. It's far too early to say whether that is the case, but this is a death penalty eligible case. Do you want to talk about that, Chief?
No, I think it's still a part of the investigation.
Definitely
yeah,
still part
that's
of the investigation.
I don't want to get into the weeds. I think that right now he's been arraigned. He's been presented. Excuse me.
It's in progress.
It's in progress. Okay. Yes, sir.
Can you just, Mr. Johnson, can you just clarify one thing you said? You said he was in town for a conference. Is that a different conference than the one, than the event? And can you tell us more about what that particular event is?
So we're still looking into the nature of the conference we believe associated with his work, and we are contacting his employer and trying to figure out what the nature of his job was. We believe the reason for his flight was related to a conference for his work.
What's the nature of that work?
I don't have it at the top of my head.
And then the other question is, he seems to have been sort of stalking, I forgot what the word was, pacing in front of this event. And he seems to have had pretty easy egress in and out of the place. What does that say about the level of security, and are you investigating that for, and Mayor Bowser, are you considering increasing security around these sorts of events and institutions?
So regarding the movements of the subject, obviously still very much a part of the investigation, composite of collected videos, witness statements to put a full picture together before I would comment on any one particular act that he may or may not have been observed doing. As far as security goes for a private entity, I wouldn't comment on that. And as far as posture goes, I would defer to the mayor.
I think that the director is correct. This was not a event that falls into our special events category, where MPD and other government agencies have a stood up posture. This was a relatively small event at a museum. So MPD or the government agencies wouldn't stand up additional resources unless they were requested or unless we got a call for service. More than that, I will say that we have had a local program and a federal program that have helped institutions, faith institutions, and others who have been concerned about violence, anti-Semitism, or other hateful speech and rhetoric. And very recently, we have issued grants, and we have issued grants over the last several years to those institutions to harden their security, add cameras, add additional security. And I believe that the museum has done some of those things.
I'm going to sneak one last thing in.
All right. I just want to follow up with this. We've been advised that the defendant has appeared in court. He's had an attorney appointed. He's been advised by the judge that he could be punished by death or by life. And of course, we sought detention. The defendant waived his right to a detention hearing and concedes to detention. And right now, a preliminary hearing is set for June 18th at 1 o'clock. So it is done.
One clarification, Mr. Jensen.
You are not ruling out that this manifesto might have been written by this gentleman.
We don't know, and that's still very much a part of the investigation.
Okay. Good. All right. Thank you all. Yes, sir. One more.
Yes. Were any MPD officers working details at this event last night, perhaps off duty? And then a follow-up to that, when you say the FBI said a targeted event, do you believe the victims were targeted or simply the event was targeted?
So let me answer your first question, Mark. MPD was not assigned to that event. As you know, you've heard me say on last night, there were security officers assigned to the event, but not Metropolitan Police Department members. On or off duty.
And then the targeting, was that the event that was targeted or these two individuals specifically targeted?
We're not saying at this time.
Chief, one question that people are interested in is that it was announced and fairly well known that the Jewish Museum a short time ago opened a major LGBT exhibition, and we were wondering if the investigation is looking into whether the suspect might have known something about that.
Sir, we are looking into absolutely everything. There is so much information we're looking at, and I must tell you, coming from New York, I've never seen the cooperation and the collaboration that I'm seeing here. It was immediate, it was instant, it was coordinated, and my hat's off to this area. And we're going to clean it up. Thank you. Is that you?
No, but
yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You shot? And he goes, no, I was not shot. Call the police, call the police. And, you know, where the museum is, the FBI is right next door. The police are close by. So the police sirens have already started. And he's sitting on a bench amongst us for 15 minutes until he comes up to me again with two of my other friends. And one of them is helped organize the event. And she offers him a glass of water just because he seems so off, and he takes it, he drinks it. And I
Coming out of Washington, D.C., where he suspected.
To the subject we began with, the killing of those two Israeli embassy staffers. Chicago law enforcement authorities were searching the suspect's apartment. Whitney Wild is in Chicago and joins me now live. What are we learning, Whitney, about the suspect and what, if anything, they discovered inside his home?
We don't yet know what they might have taken out of this address that's associated with Elias Rodriguez. We're hoping to hear more from law enforcement today following his first appearance in court. But what I can tell you, Jim, is that we are trying to really put together this pattern of life. And, you know, certainly law enforcement is doing that. We are doing that at CNN. What we are doing now is combing through social media that is linked to Elias Rodriguez. And what we have found is that there was this X account that appears to be linked to Elias Rodriguez. Law enforcement is investigating whether it was written by Elias Rodriguez, and it was posted shortly after the shooting. And it's important, Jim, because it seems to justify some of these actions. For example, the letter that was posted referenced armed action as a valid form of protest, called Israel's actions in Gaza genocide. Here's just one quote to help put into context the significance of this letter that was posted, again, shortly after the shooting. What's more, this is again a quote from that letter. What's more at this point, what more at this point can one say about the proportion of mangled and burned and exploded human beings whom were children? The letter said, who let this happen will never deserve the Palestinians' forgiveness. So certainly a piece of significant writing as law enforcement is combing through all of this evidence associated with Elias Rodriguez. There are a couple things that law enforcement is doing at this moment. Certainly they're trying to rule out if there's any other threat. At this point, they say absolutely not. Further, they're trying to figure out if anyone else is associated with this crime. We have no reason to think that there is, but that is a standard question law enforcement asks in the aftermath of a horrific crime like this. And then further, again, I was talking about this pattern of life. That's what law enforcement is focused on. So what they're going to do is look at everywhere he went, everything he touched, everything he said, to try to figure out how this crime was committed and why.
In the Justice Department, that can take an excruciatingly long time. I've seen it take up to a year for DOJ to decide whether they want to seek the death penalty. That said, I would expect a much quicker decision here. And when you're making that calculation inside the Justice Department, typically you look at things like premeditation. And if we look at this complaint, this was absolutely a premeditated attack. You look at things like what was the motivation. To quote the FBI assistant director just now, he said it was a targeted anti-Semitic violence. You look at the number of victims. Here we have multiple victims, 2. You look at the especially cruel way that the murder was carried out. And if you look at the complaint, I'm not even going to repeat this on air, it's so chilling, but if you look at the complaint, the way this individual actually killed these 2 innocent victims is gut-wrenching. So I think this is a decision that DOJ is going to expedite, and I'd be shocked if they do not seek the death penalty ultimately.
CNN's Evan Pettis was in the room during that press conference. Evan, what new information did we learn about the suspect?
Well, Jake, one of the things that really stood out from that press conference is that the suspect came to Washington on Tuesday, and he came here, according to the FBI, for a work conference. It appears he had some work reason for him to come to Washington. He, according to this, to the criminal complaint, he actually checked a weapon, his firearm, when he took a flight from Chicago Airport to Washington, D.C. And so then they also know he was here somewhere. They didn't identify where he's been staying over the day before he carried out the shooting. But what it tells you a little bit about is sort of the planning and motivation. They described that he bought a ticket to this event. This was an event, Jake, that wasn't advertised, widely advertised. You had to register to even know the location of where this event was happening. And so that's part of what the FBI and what the Metropolitan Police are now looking into, to try to, again, put together a picture of everything, of every place he's been. One of the things they asked for is for the public to say, anyone who saw him in those 24 or 36 hours before this shooting, this horrific shooting took place, to call the FBI and let them know, because they're still trying to fill in the gap there of what he did when he first got to Washington and how he came to choose this event, which was, as Ellie points out, this was a targeted anti-Semitic attack. And so you can expect that is going to be part of the charges that we might see in the future, in the next few weeks. Jake?
Andy McCabe, let me ask you, a few years ago, after the Tree of Life synagogue killing, there was a raft, including that, of anti-Semitic violence from people who were on the right. And it seems like right now we are in the midst of a raft of anti-Semitic violence from people who are on the left. We saw somebody with the same twisted motivation who tried to kill Governor Shapiro and his wife and kids and others at the governor's mansion. There have been all sorts of other foiled plots and the like. What can be done about this?
Jake, what you're seeing is the current form of this tidal wave of hate crimes that's been going up in this country in the last 10 years. Hate crimes have doubled in the United States from 2014, about 6,000 a year in 2014, up to 12,000 in 2023. The overwhelming majority of those hate crimes are targeted towards the Jewish population. That's why it is a target that is sought out, vilified, and is the source of all conspiracy theories and grievances by all kinds of different extremists, be they right, left, in the middle, or wherever else. The Jewish community has addressed this in the best way that they possibly can. You have the Secured Communities Network. You have all the work that's been done to try to secure synagogues and community centers. I can tell you from my own personal experience working with the Jewish community, you have communities in places as large as DC and New York and places as small as Columbus, Ohio, that are engaged in trying to better secure their locations and their communities, but they cannot do it alone. At some point, we have to start addressing these things for what they are. I think the sort of prosecution that the U.S. Attorney spoke of, the investigation prosecution that she foreshadowed today, is exactly where this needs to be.
And Ellie, one of the things is just, there's so many tragic things about this horrific anti-Semitic act of terrorism. Sarah Milgram, one of the 2 young people killed, she was 26. There is video of her in high school in Kansas in 2017 talking to a local news station. She lived in Overland Park, Kansas, an area where a lot of Jewish people live, in Overland Park, Kansas, talking about swastikas painted on her school, and talking about the fact that she was already worried about going to synagogue, whether or not she's safe, and now she has to worry about going to school, whether she was safe. Now, that's swastikas, that's far-right stuff. Now she's killed by somebody far left. What's your? I know we've talked about this before because we talked about this on Holocaust Remembrance Day. I think it was about your ancestors and the Holocaust. What are you thinking? What are you feeling when you hear about this?
It's the whole thing is unspeakable, Jake. It's just grotesque and gut wrenching. But look, this is a sad reality of being a Jewish person in the United States or around the world today. You mentioned that the victim, Ms. Milgram, grew up sort of seeing this type of anti-Semitic sentiment. Well, studies have shown that young people, about 50% of all young people, see Nazi